On a bend of the Irrawaddy, in the parched heart of Upper Myanmar, the plain of Bagan carries more surviving brick temples than anywhere else on earth. Over roughly 2.5 centuries, the kings of one small kingdom raised more than 10,000 monuments here. Then, almost as suddenly as it rose, the kingdom that built them was gone. Long before the Burmans, the Payu had built walled cities along this river. Thaton, Hailing, and greatest of them, Sri Ksetra. The earliest settlement at Bagan itself is radiocarbon dated to around 650 of the Common Era, a small place on the edge of a much older world. The Burmese royal chronicles tell it differently. They say a king named Thaton had founded Bagan in the 2nd century and that King Pindia walled the city in 849. That date is still printed in guidebooks. It is also tradition rather than record, written down centuries later. The evidence points later. Radiocarbon dating of the walls suggests around 980. The first foreign notice of Bagan comes from Song, China, when envoys reached the imperial capital in 1004. For most of that early period, Bagan was simply one settlement among rivals, and its walled core was a tenth the size of Sri Ksetra. Then, in December of 1044, Anawrahta took the throne. His accession is the first date in Burmese history confirmed by inscription, which is why historians treat it as the real beginning. His first great act was not a conquest. He repaired the lake at Maktila and cut weirs and canals across the Kyoks district, turning dry ground into a rice granary. Parts of that system still carry water today. Tradition says a monk named Shin Arahan turned the king toward Theravada Buddhism. What is certain is that from the middle of the 11th century the crown's patronage flowed that way. Yet Bagan never became narrow. Hindu shrines and the worship of the Nats, the native spirits, carried on beside the new orthodoxy. The chronicles then describe a famous conquest. In 1057, they say Anawrahta stormed the Mon city of Thaton and carried off its king, its scriptures, and the craftsmen who would build Bagan. It is a tidy story. The historian Michael Ong Thwin has argued it may never have happened. What the archaeology does show is Rish. Votive tablets stamped with Anawrahta's name turn up from the Tenasserim coast to Katha in the north. Around 1059, he began the Shwezigan Pagoda, the golden bell that became the model for Burmese stupas ever after. He died in 1077. Kyan Sitha, a general turned king, was the great synthesizer. He courted Mon scholars, claimed the Payu past as his own, and in 1105 completed the Ananda Temple, a white cruciform hall with 4 colossal standing Buddhas facing the 4 directions. It has been called the Westminster Abbey of Burma. By the end of his reign, Song, China, and the Cholas of India dealt with Bagan as a power. A year later, a prince set up a pillar at Mean Kaaba carrying the same dedication in 4 languages: Old Burmese, Pali, Old Mon, and Payu. The Mayasdi inscription became the key that let scholars read Payu at all. It sits today on the UNESCO Memory of the World Register, and it is often called the Rosetta Stone of Burma. Under Ulan Sithu, the kingdom standardized its weights and measures and issued its first collection of royal judgments. In 1151, his masons finished the Thaton, 66 meters to the pinnacle and still the tallest temple in Bagan. The half-century that follows, from about 1150 to 1200, is when the plain filled fastest. His successor Narathu took the throne by murdering his father and his brother. The Dhammayangi, the largest temple on the plain, is traditionally read as his atonement. It was never finished. Its inner corridors were bricked up for reasons nobody has explained, and its masonry is so tight that no blade can be pushed between the bricks. Narathu himself was assassinated within 4 years. Narapatasithu is usually called the last great king of Bagan. The empire reached its widest extent under him, south toward the Strait of Malacca and east to the Salween. He raised the first documented standing army in Burmese history, and in 1183 he built the Suleimani. In his reign, Burmese finally displaced Mon and Payu as the written language of the kingdom. Tila gave his name to a temple of red brick and fine plaster moldings, and he built a deliberate copy of the great temple at Bodh Gaya in India, its tower packed with more than 400 Buddha images. He was the last of the great builders, and most of his later work went up in the provinces, not the capital. Here is the mechanism that built Bagan and then broke it. Merit was earned by giving land to the monasteries, permanently and free of tax. For 2 centuries, that spending drove an economy of brickmakers, masons, and painters. But by the late 13th century, more than 60% of the kingdom's farmland had passed to the monkhood and off the tax rolls. In 1271, the Mongols of the Yuan demanded tribute. Narathihapet refused, twice. In 1277, a Burmese army was broken at Ngasanjian on the Yunnan frontier. A second push took Khonsan, then Tagon. Rather than defend his capital, the king fled south. He submitted in 1287, and on the 1st of July that year his own son forced him to take poison. The vassals were already gone. 250 years of empire ended, and 250 years of fragmentation followed. And no, what did not happen? Recent research suggests the Mongol armies may never have reached Bagan at all. The kingdom was hollow before they came. Bagan did not empty. It shrank into a pilgrimage town clustered around a dozen famous temples while the rest of the plain weathered away. Earthquakes did the rest, a magnitude 7 shock in 1975 and another in 2016 that damaged nearly 400 monuments. It took 24 years and a second, more careful campaign of conservation before Bagan was finally inscribed as a World Heritage Site in July of 2019. The property records 3,595 monuments. More than 2,000 temples and stupas still stand on the plain, the visible remainder of a kingdom that gave away its own ground, one act of merit at a time.